Hi, this is Dr. Hart. International Relations, Liberalism. Precursors of Liberalism. Liberalism, like other theories of international relations, has its own precursors. And just like other theories of international relations, these precursors can be found in philosophy and history. The first author we will consider is Charles Montesquieu. Now, if you ever studied American politics, you know that Montesquieu is the progenitor of the idea of separation of powers. And the founders of the U.S. Constitution held a very high opinion of Charles Montesquieu. They often referred to him during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. But in this context, in the context of international relations, he is important because he considered the causes of war. And according to Montesquieu, war is caused by society, not by human nature. His solution to the problem of war is to have the right education and right international law. People should be educated in the values of the Enlightenment. They should be taught that through reason, through science, and continuous improvement in mutual understanding and continuous improvement in material human conditions, law will be seen as irrational and unnecessary. The next philosopher we consider is Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that war results from international anarchy. Now, please note that this part of his approach is very similar to realism. According to Kant, nobody can control the international environment, and in such a state, sooner or later, war will arise, no matter what. So the solution to the problem of war was to create a sort of world government. I say a sort because this government was supposed to be rather weak and not like strong governments most of us know today. Weak because in it, states would retain their sovereignty. So this was supposed to be a sort of confederation of self-interested states. And repeated interactions between and among these states would eventually settle them down into a state of peace. Next, we consider Woodrow Wilson, who was not a philosopher, but rather President of the United States. And among presidents of the United States, he was one of the few who was a true intellectual and a deep and original thinker. He began his career as a lawyer, then became a college professor of political science, then became president of Princeton University, then governor of New Jersey, then president of the United States. Now, Woodrow Wilson believed in what is today known as collective security. That's when aggression of one state would be countered by automatic and collective reaction by other states. And this would lead to more or less perpetual peace. The League of Nations, the majority of whose 26 provisions focused on preventing war, was meant to provide such collective security. But the United States Senate failed to ratify the Versailles Treaty, and so the United States did not become a member of the League of Nations. The League of Nations proved to be a failure, and needless to say, failed to prevent war. Within 20 years after its creation, the world was plunged into a second and a far more brutal world war than the first war had been. Now, what are the key tenets of liberalism that came out of all of these precursors? First, states, NGOs, IGOs are all more or less equally important actors in international relations. Please note how this is different from realism. In realism, states are the most important actors. But not so in liberalism. In liberalism, They're all on the same playing field, all on the same level. Second, human nature is basically good. Humans are social and they tend to cooperate with one another. This is also different from the implicit assumption of realism that human beings are naturally very aggressive and selfish. Recall Thomas Hobbes and Niccolo Machiavelli. So, in terms of human nature, liberalism has a much sunnier view of it than does realism. Next, liberalism believes that states are rational. States, in their nature, that matters. So there's a difference between, let's say, totalitarian and authoritarian states on one hand and democratic states on the other. Democratic states, or democracies for short, are less likely to start a war, especially with each other. In fact, as far as I know, democracies do not go to war against each other. They do sometimes go to war against non-democracies, and sometimes they even start a war first against non-democracies, but they don't go to war against one another. And so liberalism uses that as an leverage, as an argument in its favor to say, look, if a state becomes democratic, it's less likely to go to war. What would happen if all countries in the world became democratic? Well, since democracies don't go to war with each other, then there would be no war. There would be perpetual peace. And finally, liberalism believes that self-interest of the states managed by robust institutions leads to cooperation and change. In other words, states still remain self-interested, but if you manage that by strong institutions, workable international institutions, then there will be cooperation among them and there will be change for the better within the international system. Since the late 1970s, we've had so-called neoliberal institutionalism, or simply neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is a riff, is a slightly different theme on the traditional liberal approach in international relations. Neoliberalism says that states cooperate most of the time. And the reason why states cooperate most of the time is complex interdependence. That's the key phrase in neoliberalism. Complex interdependence. It means three things at the same time. First, states are connected through many channels, formal and informal. And non-state actors, like MNCs, connect the states, meaning that MNCs create mutual interests between the states. Second, there is no hierarchy of issues. That is, security is not necessarily more important than economic development. And third, there is less use of military force in the world. That's just an empirical observation. And this is the result of factors 1 and 2 I just mentioned. There are also other liberal theories, particularly in recent decades in the 21st century. Some liberal theorists have a bottom-up view of international relations. What does that mean? It means that key actors in international politics are individuals and organizations like NGOs or MNCs. And states' actions in international politics are derivatives from the interests of these domestic actors. So note how this is different from earlier liberal theorists for whom the states are equal independent actors in international politics. For more contemporary liberal theories, what you find is that states are less important because what states do in international relations is the outcome of domestic balance of power, as what happens in domestic politics. Essentially, For liberal thinkers, international politics is an extension of domestic politics. It is powerful domestic interests that determine which international politics of a given state will take which direction. So, for example, if in the United States Chamber of Commerce and other powerful business groups, like let's say American Petroleum Institute, the Business Roundtable, and a various number of powerful business industry groups, let's say they dominate domestic politics. I'm not asserting this to be true. I'm saying, imagine that this is true. Then according to these modern liberal theorists, you would see the United States pursuing the kind of international politics that benefits these business groups. And what happens next? Well, if it just so happens that other states have a similar balance of power within their own domestic societies, they will pursue the same type of international policies. So states with similar domestic powerful interests will have similar and harmonious international policies. To summarize, in the traditional liberal view, states cooperate because of right education plus right international political institutions. That's the traditional liberal view. In the neoliberal view, states cooperate because they are interconnected in multiple ways, plus the interaction between them is iterative. That is to say, it is continuously repeated, creating an incentive for the states to cooperate. And finally, in other liberal theories, states cooperate even when the interests of their domestic elites coincide. Thank you.